Author's note. If you're reading this, you're probably not looking for one more religious self-help book that promises to fix your faith with a checklist and a condescending smile. Good. That's not what this is, and I'm the last guy qualified to write one. If you've ever muttered, "Oh hell," in the church parking lot, argued with God in a Taco Bell drive-thru, or tried and failed to pray like a well-adjusted adult, congratulations. You're the exact sort of glorious disaster this book was written for. I grew up believing that faith was mostly about looking the part, smiling through the existential dread, hiding your doubts, and for the love of all that's holy, keeping your language family-friendly in God's house. Then real life happened. Grief, panic attacks, failing relationships, church people acting like Pharisees on Twitter, kids melting down in the communion line, bills stacking up like dirty dishes in the sink. Turns out, Jesus is a lot more interested in an ugly honesty than my pious performance. And grace doesn't give a damn about your filter. It will hunt you down in sweatpants and find you mid-rant with a mouthful of regret. This book is for the ones who've been told they're too honest, too messy, too loud, or too much for polite church company. It's for believers who can't make it through a single worship set without their mind wandering to overdue oil changes, unsent apologies, and what's for lunch? It's for the people who need a little less fake it till you make it, and a little more say it like it is, then trust God loves you anyway. You will not find 5 easy steps to holiness or a script to help you win at Christian branding. I'm not here to sell you certainty or shame you into pretending. What I offer is the only thing I know that can survive real life. An honest, unpolished, thoroughly cussed out kind of faith. A faith that doubts, fails, rages, limps, gets up, and still finds God waiting with coffee, side-eye, and forgiveness for the millionth time. If you find yourself still screwing up, still showing up, and still somehow believing that grace might just outlast your mistakes, then pull up a chair. Let's trade confessions, not credentials. This book is written in the hope that you'll finally stop pretending God can only love the filtered version of you. Spoiler, the unfiltered you is the only one who ever gets saved. Now, let's get honest, and if you let a swear slip somewhere between prayers, trust me, you're in good company. Dustin Gross. Prologue. Confession at the Coffee Bar. There's a sacred moment most churches never witness. It doesn't happen at the altar or behind a pulpit polished by decades of holy sweat. It doesn't even happen in the sanctuary, unless you count the time someone's toddler puked on the hymnals during Christmas Eve service. The holiest confessions I know happen at the coffee bar, crammed between a lopsided tower of styrofoam cups and a slow-moving, eternally disgruntled church volunteer who's just trying to figure out which one of these creamers is non-dairy. You'd think spiritual revolution would strike in the deep, candlelit hush of a cathedral, where even your sneakers feel compelled to tiptoe. But let's be real. The place where faith gets honest, the only place it stands a fighting chance, is right there between the donuts and the decaf with some guy's phone blazing Highway to Hell in his pocket and a dozen Sunday school kids making more noise than the Fall of Jericho. I spent too many years pretending that I was one of those put-together Christians, the kind who has a verse ready for every situation and never shows up to worship with a hangover of regret. In my head, I could recite all the right answers. Grace is free. Forgiveness is forever. And God loves you just the way you are. But what came out of my mouth in the parking lot told a different story, especially on the days I'd had enough of pretending, enough of polite small talk, enough of the churchy performance art we all learned to put on like an ill-fitting blazer. Most of us learned early that church is a place for your good side. Keep the mess hidden, button the collar, smooth the hair, bite your tongue if you're about to say something real. If you're falling apart, at least do it discreetly, preferably in the privacy of your own car, where nobody can hear you cuss about the fight you just had with your spouse, or the argument you lost with your own doubt. Here's my first confession. I'm not good at being a respectable Christian. Never have been. I can't get through a week without screwing something up, blowing my fuse, or muttering a string of words I definitely did not learn in Sunday school. I've doubted more often than I've believed, gotten angry more times than I can count, and told God things I'd never admit to my grandmother. The real miracle isn't that I'm still showing up. The miracle is that God keeps showing up too. Every time I think I've finally reached the limit of His patience, He reminds me, usually through something embarrassingly ordinary, that His grace runs laps around my failures. Sometimes the message comes in a line from a worship song I barely remember singing. Sometimes it's in a conversation with a stranger at the coffee bar who admits, quietly, that they're not okay either. Let's be honest, faith isn't built in cathedrals. It's built in Target parking lots, hospital waiting rooms, and on the phone with customer service after your kid flushed your debit card. The places where you're too tired to fake it, too desperate to keep up appearances, and too human to say anything other than what's true in the moment. I've prayed more honest prayers in a bathroom stall than in my Bible study, and I've met more mercy in a breakdown than in a month of sermons. This book is for people who know what it's like to drop the church mask, if only for a second, and let themselves be seen for the beautiful wreck they are. People who have cussed in the drive-thru line, only to realize the kid at the window goes to their church. People who wonder if they're the only ones who can't keep their faith looking Instagram-worthy. People who are exhausted by the idea that holiness means being tidy, quiet, and perpetually cheerful. If you're one of those people, you're my tribe. Pull up a chair, pour something stronger than church coffee, and let's stop pretending that honesty and holiness are opposites. I grew up on a steady diet of American Christianity, the kind where every answer comes prepackaged and shrink-wrapped for your spiritual safety. Don't ask hard questions, just keep smiling. Don't let anyone see the cracks. God forbid you admit that you're more confused than convinced, or that some days you only show up for the donuts and to keep your mother from asking questions. I spent years in pews learning to nod at things I didn't believe and clap for things I didn't understand. The older I got, the more I realized that real faith is a contact sport. You come away from it with bruises, doubts, and enough secondhand embarrassment to make a Baptist preacher blush. Grace is for the people who can't keep up with the program, for the ones who never got their act together, for the repeat offenders, and the chronic spiritual procrastinators. What nobody tells you, what you only find out when your life comes unglued, is that the people who look the holiest are usually the ones who've gotten best at hiding. I've known saints with tattoos, alcoholics who pray better than any pastor, and single mothers who are more faithful than every board member put together. I've known addicts who know more about surrender than any missionary, and broken people whose prayers are the only thing keeping the church lights on. You learn a lot at the coffee bar, if you're willing to listen. I once overheard a guy, 2 cups in, say, "I'm just here because it's cheaper than therapy and nobody judges how much sugar you put in your coffee." His friend nodded, stirring enough cream into his cup to reconstitute a small cow, and said, "Yeah, I figure if God wanted me holier, He'd have made me a morning person." That's the theology that survives Monday. Confession. Sometimes I envy people who seem to have it together, who say, "I'll pray for you," without a hint of irony, who never appear to lose their temper or their faith. But every time I try to fake it, my spirit revolts. My mouth slips, my patience frays, and my prayers get as raw as my coffee, unfiltered, undiluted, and honest to the point of offense. Somewhere along the line, I realize that God isn't offended by my honesty. He's only disappointed by my pretending. The Psalms are full of prayers that would make most deacons clutch their pearls. The prophets yelled at God. The disciples bailed on Jesus when things got real. Even Christ, bleeding and abandoned, cried out, Why have you forsaken me? If God wanted robots, he wouldn't have invented confession, or coffee for that matter. The real currency of faith is not certainty, but trust. Not a polish, but presence. Not spotless doctrine, but a willingness to show up with your mess and admit that you need more grace than you'd like to confess. That's what this book is. A running confession, punctuated by sarcasm, side-eye, and the kind of hope you only discover after you've lost every illusion you thought you needed to survive. It's not a manual for spiritual success. It's a field guide for fellow spiritual screw-ups who refuse to give up on Jesus just because religion made them feel like a disappointment. If you're reading this hoping for easy answers, look elsewhere. If you're hoping for a friend who's screwed up as many times as you and still believes in grace, then welcome home. I have spent too much of my life trying to sound more spiritual than I am, afraid that honesty would get me in trouble with the church people. But church people are just people, and people are a mess. Every time I've let my guard down, every time I've confessed something ugly or embarrassing, I've found more real friendship and more real faith than all the Sunday school answers combined. Honesty is the soil where grace grows. And it never grows in a greenhouse. It grows in the dirt, among the weeds, under the harsh light of reality where you admit to God and the guy pouring the coffee that you're not okay and you're tired of acting like you are. One Sunday, a friend leaned over during the closing hymn and whispered, "I don't think I believe half of what we just sang." I laughed probably too loud and said, "I'm just trying not to cuss before the benediction." There's more faith in that exchange than in 1,000 pious nods. We all limp to the altar. Some of us just have the decency to admit it. I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to walk out of church. Not because I stopped believing in God, but because I got tired of pretending. Tired of feeling like I was the only one who didn't get the memo on how to be holy. Tired of being told, directly or not, that there was something uniquely wrong with me because I couldn't make my doubts shut up or my mouth behave. The secret nobody wants to say out loud is that everyone in church is just as lost as you are. The only difference is how well we hide it. The good news, maybe the only news worth believing, is that God's not looking for people who have it together. He's looking for people who are finally ready to admit they don't. You do not have to fix yourself before you belong. You do not have to believe anything before you start hoping for grace. You do not have to clean up your language before you open your mouth to pray. The only thing required is the courage to show up, mess and all, and say, "God, if you're listening, I could use a little help." My first real prayer as an adult was 3 words long and 2/3 profanity. I was standing in my kitchen angry at the world, angry at myself, and tired of pretending to have answers. I looked at the ceiling and muttered, "Help me, damn it!" It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. And for the first time, I didn't feel like God was a million miles away. So, yes, you will find stories in this book about people cussing in church parking lots, about prayers that sound more like rants, and about moments when faith comes unplugged. And about moments when faith comes unglued at the worst possible time. You will not find sanitized answers or airbrushed Christianity. What you'll get is the rough draft, complete with crossouts, side notes, and coffee stains, the kind of faith that survives when the filter comes off. This is my confession. I'm still figuring it out. I still lose my patience, still snap at my kid, still mutter words I hope the neighbors can't hear. Still wake up some mornings wondering if God got as tired of me as I am. And yet every time, without fail, I find grace waiting for me right where I left it. At the coffee bar, at the steering wheel, in the silence between 2 bad decisions. Faith is not about getting it right. It's about admitting when you've gotten it wrong and trusting that God is stubborn enough to love you anyway. If you need someone to tell you that's okay, consider it told. If you're looking for permission to stop pretending, you've got it. The table's big enough for all of us, the cynics, the strugglers, the barely believers, and the ones who just need a damn break. If you find yourself more at home with the honest than the holy, you're in the right place. So here's my invitation. Bring your whole self, the polite words and the raw ones, the prayers that sound good and the ones that sound like screaming into the void. Bring your guilt, your confession, your sarcasm, your hope. Bring the questions you're afraid to ask, the failures you wish you could forget, and the secret relief you feel when someone finally admits it's not all working out. I'll bring mine too. Let's trade stories, not credentials. Let's build faith out of confessions, not out of performance. And if you let a cuss word slip between the verses, you'll be in good company. So here's to the coffee bar, the holiest place in church, if only because it's where the masks come off and grace finally gets to work. Here's to the confessions we make when we think no one's listening. Here's to the kind of faith that keeps showing up even when we don't feel worthy. May you find in these pages the courage to be real, the freedom to be honest, and the hope that God's mercy isn't waiting for you to clean up your act. It's already here, in the mess, in the noise, in the awkward laugh you share with someone who's just as lost as you are. Welcome to the confession at the coffee bar. Grab a cup, pull up a chair, and let's get real. Grace is on the house.